Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Understable Discourse. Hopefully you're a place to go for all the stats and analysis in the game. This week I have a bit of a shorter episode for you as we've got a lot going on, but not a lot of time to prep this week. We're going to look at the President's Cup, we're going to go look at the Champions Cup, and yep, we're going to talk about the foot fault heard around the world, so let's get into it. Now, the President's Cup went down on Wednesday before the major, and honestly, it was a bit lackluster in my opinion. While the actual event itself, the play and the matchups were interesting, I think there's just so much better that they can do when it comes to the President's Cup and what they can do just to make it better for everybody. And before I go into my critiques and recommendations, let's look at the results themselves. And surprise everybody, Team USA wins. But in all seriousness, this really wasn't quite the one-sided route that everyone thought it was going to be when you really look at it. Despite Team Europe snubbing people like Jesse Nieminen, they still put up some solid competition. On the FPO side of the aisle, I think we kind of expected that a little bit because of the talent of the European FPO pool, but we saw this pretty well because both Evelina and Holland tied in the individual score segment, with Kristin taking third during that portion, leaving Owen to come up a few strokes short in fourth place. So advantage Europe in the stroke play during the first round. And then additionally in the match play portion, both Kristin and Evelina took down their individual matchups with, I would say, relative ease, winning without really even needing to play all 9 holes. So I think we knew going into this that Team Europe had the advantage when it came to the FPO side, and yeah, but when you talk about the MPO part of it, with the exception of Ricky and Calvin, the other members of Team USA dominated the stroke play in their respective groups. And when I say other than Ricky and Calvin, it's not because they played poorly, it's just because that, Juna Heinonen and Vaino Makala decided to play extremely well, with Ricky finishing at -4 for the 9-hole loop, and the other 3 finishing at -5, which, funny enough, made that the most entertaining group to watch during the first round of the President's Cup. And once we made it to the match play portion, though, when it comes to the MPO side of things, Team Europe actually did pretty well, taking a win with Simon over Isaac Robinson, and Juna decided to draw Ricky to a tie. Now, Calvin, AB, Macbeth, and Gannon, the 4 horsemen of the President's Cup apocalypse, they all took the wins in their matches, but when you look at it side by side, the Euros took 3.5 matches and USA took 4.5 matches, and that is a lot closer than I think most people expected it to be. So had Europe done a little bit better in the stroke play side of things, this could have been closer, across the board. I think when I look at my overall opinion of the event itself, it was just too fast. I would love to see the event expanded beyond just an afternoon of play and kind of turn it into something with a little bit more drama and prestige. I mean, imagine an entire weekend where an expanded US and Euro team had to do things like the skill shot or a putting challenge or maybe a distance showcase, because I think when you talk about things like distance and those skill sets, I think Team Europe can probably compete pretty well with a lot of the Team USA. And then you add exciting round formats like alternate shot or best shot or worst shot. One of the things that I would love to see is maybe a best shot collegiate double style format where you've got teams of 4 players and they're separated into 2 pairs, pair A and pair B, and pair A tees off on hole 1, the best shot is taken, and then pair B now has to play from that lie, playing best shot, and they alternate until the hole is finished. And then on hole 2, pair B tees off first, and you kind of alternate like that throughout the course. I think that would set up for some really cool just strategy on who's partnered with whom, and then the shot types. You could see players going for lines that you wouldn't normally see them go for because their partner, has a great shot. I think there's room for a lot of fun stuff there that we're just not getting. So having an extended weekend would be really interesting. And even if it wasn't an extended weekend, give us one full day with a round of like stroke play and then a round of some kind of best shot doubles or alt shot or collegiate doubles. I think there's a lot more they could do with it. And I would also love to see, an expansion maybe a bit on the FPO side, because the Euro FPO field is getting very strong. And I just think we need to give them a chance to shine a bit more when it comes to players. Because, you're looking at only 2 matchups on the FPO side compared to the 6 matchups on the MPO side, and typically the FPO field isn't only a quarter of the size of the MPO field. I mean, sometimes it can be. I'd love to see that expanded to maybe, double the FPO players, so you're looking at 4 matches to 6 matches, or 4. I don't even care if you do 4 matches to 8 matches. A few more I think would be beneficial. So you add in a couple more matches with people like Silva and Hannah Wynn, or maybe Annika Steen. Like there's you could definitely get some really competitive FPO side when it comes to a President's Cup scenario. So I'd love to see a bit of an expansion there beyond just the 2 players. But let's go on and discuss the actual major that happened this weekend and some of the things that occurred. So the Champions Cup, Swenson Park. I'll start out by saying this. The weekend definitely went better than expected, for sure. I know that there was some concern about the PDGA's overall involvement, and is this course really going to be worth what we normally typically see when we think about what we expect from a Champions Cup and the hard wooded major kind of thing. But I think it actually went better than people expected it to be. Did it go pop off on the same level of past Champions Cups? I don't know that I'd say that. But the course did definitely show its teeth when it needed to, albeit that was most likely because of the wind more than anything else. I think if we would have had a weekend of calm weather with no wind, you would have seen scores in the -40 area for the MPO field. But we had some pop-off moments when it comes to different players. Looking at the course itself, the FPO played pretty solid on both layouts, and you can see the effects of the wind from round to round. But layout A gave us 2.9 strokes over par in round 1 and 1.76 strokes over par in round 2. And as they moved into layout B, we saw the wind definitely beefing up a bit, and especially not just the intensity of the wind, but the direction the wind was in a lot of the holes was not very advantageous to the play. And so we saw that first round of the B layout, round 3, move up to 3.44 strokes over par, and then we had a cut. So when you cut the field below the cash line, you now have the best players in the field playing the course, which clearly mattered because now the course played 1.06 strokes over par. And on the MPO side, we saw that same kind of standard fall into place, with layout A coming in at -1.81 and -1.4 strokes under par for the first 2 rounds respectively. And very similar to the FPO, the wind really made round 3 critical for a lot of players. There was a lot of people who I think really hoped that they were going to be able to finish above that cut line, and players who were above the cut line who thought, I can definitely hold my position here. And the wind shook up a lot of people. And the entire field shot -0.37 strokes under par. And even with the bottom of the field intact during that time, any time that the MPO field shoots close to going over par or even, that was a difficult day across the board. So round 3 was tough on a lot of players. And then following the cut into round 4, even though the wind still was there, the best round yet was shot at -2.47 strokes under par for the MPO field, which is pretty typical from what we've seen before. There are a couple holes that I want to reference, I think, that are worth looking into. Most importantly is hole 18. I think it's by far and away the most consequential hole that we saw all weekend long. There were some other big holes just from what happened on those holes, like hole 16 for the FPO and hole 17 for the MPO was a difficult hole as well, but hole 18 was the one. It averaged over half a stroke over par for the first 3 rounds for the MPO before the cut, and 0.66 strokes over par for the FPO in that same time frame. And the only real thing that I would say would be an improvement on the hole, if I'm being nitpicky, is I'd love to see what would happen if we took away the safe landing stretch to the left and made that final approach into kind of a true island format. I mean, just imagine that final approach had a drop zone at the water's edge on the opposite side of where the island is at, and you have to land it on the island to be safe, and that all OB is stroke and distance. It's not a very far shot, but with the wind and the pressure mounting, that'd be very, very challenging for the top in our sport to handle. I'd love to see something like that, and I think a lot of people would agree, especially in the professional circuit, that would be, I think, a good change. And having these bailout areas to the left, even if you throw out of bounds, being able to advance so far is just, I don't know, it doesn't challenge the field the way it should be. But either way, I still love the hole, especially with like the peninsula providing a centralized point for a bunch of different places for spectators to view. I mean, you had everyone there who was on 18's green, you had the Pirate Island people, and if you look around the water's edge, it kind of was a point where a number of other greens could see and have access to viewing hole 18's green. So people were they did like a shot from the aerial view where it showed all the different people and all the different positions. It was really cool to see how that kind of looked from a spectator perspective. Hole 13 is the other one that I want to talk about because it showed something that I would say is a really, really interesting statistical anomaly that's worth talking about on the MPO side that we're going to be looking into more detail this year as the season goes on. But during the final round, I think that we can all agree, I think you right out there, and I can agree that the top of the field is playing. So these are probably the best chance that we're going to get at seeing top of the field level statistics. Now, I know that sometimes some of the top people can fall out of the cut line, and that happens, but for this event, this is the top of the field playing. And on hole 13, if you don't make the island, you advance to a drop zone putt from just outside of C1. And I think that people and course designers think that these are challenging ways to handle the field, and maybe they think that they're entertaining, but they're just not efficient ways to challenge the top of the MPO field, giving them a putt from 40 or 45 or 50. I'm going to Maple Hill this weekend, and I know there's, you think about hole 8 with the drop zone putt coming back at the basket, and hole 14 doing something very similar. That's kind of where some of these putts started to take, I'd say, a lot of precedence in the eye of the public and the eye of disc golf media. And I just don't think they do the situation justice. And now we have some stats that we can really see that. And like I said, something that we're going to be looking at throughout this year. I want to take some of these really predominant holes with these drop zone putts, strip away the top portion of the field and see how they perform on them compared to the rest of the field, and maybe we'll get a better perspective on how the field plays them. But looking at this particular hole for this particular event, in the final round, the top players of the field threw out of bounds 18 total times. Now, 2 of those OB, they were done after the tee shot. Someone maybe putt and the wind got a hold of it and went out of bounds. So of the 18 OBs, 16 of them were off the drive. So 16 people are advancing to the drop zone off the tee. And maybe the course designers are like, well, only a couple people are going to hit that putt. No, only 6 of those 16 missed that putt. That means 10 players, or 63% of the field, they weren't really truly punished for a poor tee shot. Now, you can make the argument that getting a par and not a birdie is punishment enough, but I think that, sending them over there and saying, hey, we're going to reward you with a par putt, and then having 63% of them make that par putt shows us that these just aren't punishing ways to deal with, this kind of thing. And I'm just trying to show us that these drop zone putts aren't a way to challenge the top of the field. So I'll get off my soapbox with it, but we're going to be looking at that later this season. Moving into the results of the Champions Cup, for the FPO field, it started off extremely hot with a number of players shooting under par, but the standout performances definitely came from Silva Saarinen and Hannah Wynn, who both birdied 10 holes, Hannah picking up just a single bogey along the way to set them at -10 and -9. And it kind of brought up that same storyline of, can Silva maintain this pace and keep herself in a position to win? And it's a 4-round event, and we know that there are some heavy hitters in the FPO field who are not going to be kept down because of one singular round. And speaking of those heavy hitters, in round 2, Paige Pierce, Missy Gannon, and Kristin all shot -9 to close the lead to 3 strokes compared to Silva's -7. Now, it isn't that too crazy big of a deal, because -7 is a respectable score for Silva Saarinen, but could she keep this up with the layout switch, especially with the impending wind that's coming down the stretch? Unfortunately, in true Kentucky Derby fashion, Silva was very, very quick out of the gate, jumped out to an early lead, and ultimately lost ground to the field who were conserving their energy. She shot even in round 3, falling 7 strokes back of Missy Gannon, who shot -10, jumping her into the lead by 3 strokes over Kristin and 4 strokes over Paige, and that would be the last that we really talked about Silva for the remainder of the tournament, which is just, it's a shame, but that's just That's just how it shook itself out. So like I said, we got Missy Gannon in the lead, and this is kind of where it comes to one of my favorite stats of the actual round, and that is that Missy Gannon is 6-0 when leading or tied going into the final round of a major or elite series event. And so going into round 4, we're kind of set up for this big battle between Missy, Paige, and Kristin. And the hot round of round 4 was only 5 under par, and it was not from the lead card. So the competition was fierce kind of all around the course until we get to hole 16, where at this point, Paige isn't necessarily super into contention anymore. You've got Kristin, who's down by 2 strokes to Missy. And so Kristin steps up after not a very good tee shot on 16, throws her shot, and then we cut back and we see that she has been given a foot fault call by the marshal on the card. And that's when absolute mind-blowing whatever ensues. And I'll be real with you, I'll break the fourth wall a little bit for you. I don't have notes written down here, I just have pop off. And that's because I have a lot to say on this topic, and I will say that I'm probably going to hold it back a little bit. If you'd like some more of my personal thoughts, I was on Tour Life last night. We did a conversation about this particular thing. I think they're probably going to end up putting out a single video about it, but I would go check out Tour Life and see what Brody, Yuli, and I had to say about it. It was a lot of good conversation with kind of good points coming from both sides, from Yuli and Brody, and me kind of fitting somewhere in the middle. But the points that I want to make about this are very, very simple. In my opinion, there are moments in sport when you have to be very, very particular about how and when things are called. I officiated soccer at a number of levels for close to 10 years, going all the way up to like travel soccer, high school boys and girls games, and where it would be super, super fierce competition. Rivalries would be, going nuts. And in those closing minutes of every single game, you as an official are scrutinized very heavily for every call that you make and call that you don't make. And I think that there's an important, differentiation between the idea of black and white rules and rules that are kind of gray. In some sports, you've got for disc golf, like technically the 30-second violation, that's a pretty black and white rule because it's written 30 seconds. We can very, very easily, for the most part, figure out when 30 seconds hits. Boom, done, taken care of. You have rules about like when you have to arrive for your tee times. That's very, very easy to figure out if someone doesn't arrive by that time. But you've got rules that are kind of gray area rules. That can be things like courtesy violations, was something directed with intent towards players. Those can be difficult to call. But then you've got the stance violation stuff, and in this particular foot fault, that where the rule is written in a very black and white manner, where it's like, if this happens and this happens, it's a violation. The problem is, it's a black and white rule, but it's always going to come out gray because the human eye, most of the time, cannot really determine if that fault occurred. And a great prime example of that is this moment with Kristin, where we saw that when you slowed it down on the high-speed camera, and we're talking like whatever the Disc Golf Network can afford in terms of high-speed cameras. I'm sure we could get it down to smaller frames if we wanted to. But they went frame by frame, and there was a singular frame that showed that, yes, technically, the disc was still in her hand when she started to move the disc in front of her. One singular frame. The human eye just could not, in this moment, make that call. It could not do it. So you now have two people on two sides of the fence. One group is saying that technically, it was a foot fault, so she deserved to be called. Now, the other group is saying that there's no way this person could have ever made this call. To me, I think both answers are correct. Because here's the deal. If you want to be the by-the-book marshal, and you want to be the person who is going to be on the rules no matter what, you want to make that call, fine. Make that call. But you have got to live with that call. There were times when I would be officiating a game and something would happen, players are kind of jawing with each other, and, an elbow would be thrown and I would make a call, and it would cause a direct kick right outside the 18, or even worse, it would cause like a penalty shot. And the moment you make that call, half the people there love you, half the people there hate you. The moment you don't make that call, half the people there love you, half the people there hate you. And the last thing that I could do ever, the thing I would never, ever, ever do, is make my call and then be wishy-washy in my description of why I did or did not make the call in that moment. I would live with the call that I made. That's the call I made. Here's the rule that call is from. Done. That was it. That is not what this marshal did. In fact, at one point in time, he says to Kristin, and we can kind of pick it up, that he was not able to watch both her hand and her foot. And then later they cut back to him saying that he was 100% sure of the call. So because he kind of had this flip-flop, it just creates a lot of ambiguity as to whether we can really feel like he knew what call he was making. And so if you're going to make that call as a marshal, you got to live with it. You got to own up to it, be bold. I made it. That's what it is. We're moving on. Or you go to the opposite side of it and you don't make the call because you realize that up to this point, there have been other kind of foot fault scenarios that have not been called. The general mood and atmosphere and the play is fine and we're moving along. And I can't tell with absolute certainty that it happened exactly the way I think it did. I'm going no call here. So I think either one of those is a perfectly reasonable way to handle this as a marshal. If you back out to a 10,000 foot view and you talk about whether marshals deserve to be on the card or not, I think that's a larger conversation topic that a lot of other content creators have had. And so I'm not going to add more to the pile other than to say we have to get to a point where there's some degree of consistency. And if that consistency is marshals on every card, on every hole, or no marshals, or marshals that patrol the course but only call specific things, I think that's fine. We just have to get to a spot where everyone has a fair chance at being called roughly the same way, or as close as we can get to that as possible. So that's all I'm going to say on that matter. Let's move on to the MPO side of things. Over on the MPO side, we saw an absolute monster of a round from Paul McBeth, shooting 14 under with a bogey on hole 1, mind you, and it felt like his putter was just never touching the ground, and people were starting to talk amongst themselves like, is vintage Paul McBeth back? We were hearing, McBeast mode activated. And the other interesting thing were the names that were behind him. He had Andrew Miranda at -11, Jesse Niemanen at -10, and so round 1 was kind of crazy. Going into round 2, and we find that just 10 holes in round 2, Paul McBeth is at -20. Sadly, he would never, for the rest of the event, make it past -20. Falling off very, very similarly to Silva, but a bit more abruptly. Which is crazy to think about. I mean, insane to think about. That over the first 28 holes, Paul McBeth would just surge to this number that so many in the field struggled to get past. Later, with 30, oh gosh, what would that be? So 28 holes in, you're looking at 8. With 44 holes to play, Paul McBeth can't get past -20. Just it's insane to think about. It's mind-blowing. But we had impressive rounds by Ricky, Isaac, and AB, setting up for, in my opinion, with Paul, one of the coolest lead cards that we could ever get between Paul McBeth, Ricky Wysocki, Isaac Robinson, and Anthony Barella. As cool as that lead card would end up being, though, only one of those 4 would survive to make it to the lead card for round 2. And so at -3, being the hot round for that lead group, it left enough room for guys like Sullivan Tipton to surge his way into the lead for the event by shooting -8, only 1 stroke off the hot round, followed closely by Andrew Marweed and Ben Calloway, joining Isaac Robinson on the lead card going into round 4. Due to a slow start and some unfortunate putting, Sullivan Tipton did drop out of contention not too long into the round. He did stick around and have a pretty good finish, and I would say is a guy that we have to watch out for the rest of this year. He's gonna get there someday. I think the big win for him is not far around the corner for sure. But we started to get this 3-way race forming between Anthony Barella, Isaac Robinson, and Andrew Marweed down the stretch, hoping to put some pressure on Isaac, or we'd put himself in position to birdie hole 17. But that ultimately didn't matter. One, because Marweed missed his putt, but two, because not that long before that, Isaac just shoved a sword through his through Marweed's neck by nailing, I think, one of the sickest putts of the tournament. I mean, according to Isaac in his interview the other night on Tour Life, go check that out. He said probably maybe the best putt he's ever thrown. I mean, just insane. And just like that, Isaac Robinson, the killer of majors, wins his 4th major. And it brings up a lot of conversation topics of like, why is Isaac so good at majors and doesn't seem to be as good at Elite Series events? And there are some statistics that, Edwin who does a lot of the stuff for the Foundation channel. Edwin has been pulling some insane stats on Isaac Robinson. And it's something that I want to go through a bit deeper before I talk about it here. And I think I would do it injustice if I brought it up now. But I want to go over it in the future. Obviously, it's his stuff, and I want to make sure that Foundation guys can use it. But after that, I want to bring it up because there's some things in there that I think you wouldn't expect when thinking about why Isaac is so good at majors compared to Elite Series events. But that's all I'll leave in terms of a teaser for that. We're going to go through that in some detail once I can get once I can really wrap my mind around it a bit more than what I have right now. But yeah, guys, that kind of ends it for today's episode. I know, not a very long one, and I'm sorry for that. Part of it is I have kind of a compressed week this week. I've got a lot going on outside of all this. As you know, and I've said before, it takes a lot of work to put these together, and I'm also a bit involved with a few other things, and it just takes a lot of time. I'm actually leaving in a couple hours to go to head out to Maple Hill because I'm competing in an A-tier event at Maple Hill this weekend, going out with my buddy Kyle, who's going to be caddying for me. So I'll be out there snapping some good photos of Maple Hill. I heard Simon's going to be playing. Maybe I can get a chance to catch some footage of Mr. Simon. Maybe I can get a comment for next week's episode, see how he feels about how his year's going so far. But that's it for me today. Obviously, if you like the video, it'd be great if you could give us a subscribe and hit the notification bell to catch our weekly episodes. That's super helpful to the growth of our channel. Leave a like on the video and put in the comments what you'd like to see us talk about more, what you thought about the winners this weekend, and let me know where you stand on the whole call thing. Should the marshal have made the call? Should he have not made the call? What do you think? What's the solution there? And maybe I'll start reading off some comments each week and seeing how people think about stuff. But that's it for me. I'll catch you all next week. Have a good rest of your week, good weekend. Go outside and get some disc golf in. Catch you later.